Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. So the price of gold today is breaking out once again to record all-time highs. This time it has broken through $2,600 with some conviction. Silver is also rallying, although it seems to be struggling a little bit with the $31 level. We'll talk about that. But more importantly, I want to get into the factors that are driving the rally in the gold price and the silver price that we are witnessing. Certainly one catalyst is the recent announcement from the Federal Reserve to cut the federal funds rate by 50 basis points, a promise of more easy money and dollar debasement. But there is also a major geopolitical component to this rally in safe haven assets that we are witnessing right now around the world in a variety of theaters. There are major escalations taking place, which ultimately will have profound effects on gold, silver, the dollar, and the very nature of the global economy. So we're going to delve into some of those factors today. Stick with me on this one. It's going to be a bit of a lengthy update. There's a lot to cover, but it is important. So let's get to it. I want to say a big thank you for tuning into my video today. If you enjoy it and you get some value from it, please do give it a big thumbs up down below. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to the channel? Did you know ST Bullion is giving away a monster box of 2024 Tree of Life silver coins? Sign up today at stbullion.com/sweepstakes. Okay, so starting off with the chart of gold today, which is, as you can see, breaking out to new record all-time highs above $2,600 for the first time in history. And much of this price action can be attributed to the Federal Reserve's decision earlier this week to cut by 50 basis points, all but ensuring future dollar debasement, more easy money, more stimulus to the economy, and thus higher prices for the real money that you can't print, that being gold and also silver. Now, part of this is also attributable to gold's role as a safe haven asset as we witness major geopolitical tensions rising this week. We'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I want to take a look at the chart of silver. So silver is also putting on some nice gains. You can see at the time I'm recording this video, the price is up over $31, but that appears to be a critical level that silver is having a hard time breaking through with any amount of conviction. Now, what can we attribute that to? Well, let's get a little more granular and zoom into this 1 hour chart of silver, which I think will give us a clue as to what is happening here. So going back to Wednesday, when the Federal Reserve made their announcement of the 50 basis point rate cut to the federal funds rate, this is the hour when that announcement took place. And you can see silver spiked up as high as 31.23. But then the following hour, there was this big sell-off down all the way to 29.70. So silver was very volatile on that decision. And then since then, we've seen kind of a similar dynamic where in the overnight sessions, Wednesday night, you got a big bid up in silver up to 31.29. But then when markets open in the US, the price falls. And then last night, same thing happened. Silver got bid up as high as 31.43. But then on market open, we're seeing some selling pressure. So what's going on with silver? Why can't it seem to really break through $31? Well, if we go back to the daily chart here, I think that we can understand what's occurring. Investors who got into silver maybe back in July or maybe back in May, when it was at these price levels, they are now getting out, right? They're seeing that finally they're back in the green, or maybe they're breaking even. They had gotten very enthusiastic when we had this breakout earlier this year, gotten into silver, seen the price go all the way down to 26. And, silver is a volatile asset. It's not for the faint of heart. And I think what's happening now is every time silver gets up over $31, they're just taking profits. They're getting out of the market. And if we look at this data from macromicro.me, it confirms this theory, at least somewhat. This represents the price of silver here, the red line, but then these blue lines are the net flows of the SLV ETF. Now, we only have data going back to Wednesday, the day of that Fed announcement, but you can see that earlier this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, there were some strong net outflows of the SLV ETF. This means cash is leaving one of the biggest paper derivatives of the silver market. So I think what we're witnessing on this silver chart, the reason that silver can't seem to quite take out $31 just yet, among retail investors, you are seeing significant profit taking every time you get a spike up in silver. That also is why, overnight it gets bid up, and then when US markets open, it sells off. So this has nothing to do with the physical market. This is just profit taking. I don't think it's manipulation either, by the way. I know many of us in the stacking community, I read the comments tend to label any downturn in the silver price as simply manipulation by the banks, driving the price down artificially. And, sometimes that's true, but in this case, I really think it's just normal profit-taking behavior. Zooming back into this 1 hour chart, it's the same reason that we got this big sell-off following the Fed announcement. This is a classic sell the news moment. So investors were waiting for that news for a long time, probably the most anticipated Fed rate cut in history. And then when we got the news, we got the spike up and everybody sold. Everybody took their profits. So psychologically, this is a very normal phenomenon in markets. And really, if you're a strong hand, you should just be glad that silver isn't ripping higher just yet, because this gives us the opportunity to accumulate more at a relatively lower price before things really kick off. Now, what is going to drive that next rally up in gold and silver? Sure, there's a lot of easy money coming, but the geopolitical situation worldwide, and we'll get into that now, is deteriorating before our very eyes at a rapid pace. So this is a headline from Politico, and I have to be careful about what I say regarding this. I did a live stream covering some of these updates earlier this week, and it got flagged. I ended up taking it down because there were some audio issues as well. But the video got flagged. I'm not sure what it was I covered, but there were some attacks, let's say, earlier this week by Israel involving some electronic handheld devices that went kaboom, right? You've probably read those stories. And since that time, and Hezbollah have really been going at it. One has to wonder if these attacks by Israel on Hezbollah were simply the opening phases of a much larger conflict. And there is some evidence recently to bear that out. There have been a lot of exchanges between Israel and Hezbollah since that time. This from today from AP: an Israeli strike on Beirut kills 3 and wounds 17 others following a Hezbollah rocket attack. Israel claiming that 100 Hezbollah rocket launchers have been hit in Lebanon. So they're launching some of the biggest airstrikes on Lebanon, on Hezbollah positions since the onset of this conflict last October. But it isn't just the Middle East. Of course, the Middle East is critically important because of oil and also because of the fact that you've got kind of all the big players there. You've got Russia involved in Syria. You've got Iran, part of the BRICS organization, diametrically opposed to Israel and other U.S. allied nations in the region. So that's very important. But also, earlier this week, this is a story that we saw. There was a huge explosion in Russia, the biggest explosion on Russian soil of the war. And this is a video down here to give you an idea of how significant this explosion was. Now, Zero Hedge covered this pretty nicely. They mentioned that this video that you're looking at here was taken from 2 kilometers away or more. So that indicates just how big this explosion was. A NASA satellite image showed fires covering an area of 5.2 square miles. And initial reports indicate that this was a main missile and artillery arsenal of the Russian militaries. Now, this is located 488 kilometers northeast of the Ukraine border. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, initial reports indicate that this was a Ukrainian drone strike on this facility. However, given the fact that it is 488 kilometers from the border, there has been some speculation that this might have been the use of a missile. Of course, these facilities where they store these missiles and artillery shells, I'm not a military guy, but my understanding is that they're located in these fortified underground concrete structures that should be at least somewhat resistant to attack. And so the idea that a drone could trigger this massive runaway explosion, look, I don't know the exact capabilities of the drones, but at least, it should make you ask some questions. And if it turns out that, say, this was a Western supplied munition, maybe an ATACMS or a Storm Shadow missile or something along those lines that triggered this explosion, and I'm not saying it was, but let's just say that it turns out that future evidence suggests that could be a big deal. In fact, it could mean that NATO and Russia are heading for a direct conflict. There's been a lot of controversy recently over the use of Western-supplied long-range precision munitions like the ATACMS, like the Storm Shadow missile, by Ukraine on Russian territory. And if you want to get an idea of just how serious this could be, just listen to what Vladimir Putin recently had to say about the use of those munitions on Russian territory.
Системами большой дальности западного производства украинская армия не в состоянии. Она не может этого делать. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создаваться.
Okay, so as Putin says, if it turns out that some munition like that is used to trigger a massive explosion inside of Russia, he would consider it to mean that NATO and Russia are directly in conflict with one another. And it appears to me that we are fast approaching that point. Now, at the same time, we have the Russian nuclear chief telling us that Moscow is ready to resume nuclear testing at any moment. So this is another potential escalation, which could be right around the corner, that we need to keep an eye on. Now, if Russia decides to test a nuclear weapon, I'm not sure what kind of an impact that will have on the war, but certainly it will lead to a ratcheting up of tensions and likely more of a bid for safe haven assets. See, all of this does tie into gold and silver, because as the geopolitical situation deteriorates, markets are going to be feeling very nervous, and it's really a perfect storm for the precious metals. You have domestically the US promising more easy money, while around the world tensions continue to soar. And it's not just in Russia, it's not just the Middle East, this is a worldwide phenomenon that we're witnessing this week of rising geopolitical tensions. This from Reuters, U.S. keeps missile system in Philippines as China tensions rise. So the U.S. has placed a mid-range missile system in the Philippines despite strong Chinese protest, and is now testing the feasibility of its use in a regional conflict. These missiles are located here in the Philippines. You can see from this image why this is so relevant to China-U.S. tensions. Here's China, here's Taiwan. Here is the new missile emplacement, and tensions between China and the Philippines over territorial waters in the South China Sea have been on the rise, and tensions surrounding Taiwan, of course, are incredibly high as well. Now, considering all of these rising geopolitical tensions, I want to take a look at this document. This is from the Commission on the National Defense Strategy. This is a bipartisan publication that was released this July, assessing the current national defense situation for the U.S. And I want to read a few excerpts from this. So first off, this document points out that China and Russia's No Limits Partnership, formed in February 2022, just days before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, has only deepened and broadened to include a military and economic partnership with Iran and North Korea, each of which presents its own significant threat to U.S. interests. This new alignment of nations opposed to U.S. interests creates a real risk, if not likelihood, that conflict anywhere could become a multi-theater or global war. And that is exactly what we are witnessing this week. You see tensions rising in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, and in the South China Sea. Moving on, here's another excerpt that I think is relevant. The consequences of an all-out war with a peer or near peer would be devastating. Such a war would not only yield massive personnel and military costs, but would also likely feature cyber attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure and a global economic recession from disruptions to supply chains, manufacturing, and trade. Adversaries could seek to deny the United States access to critical minerals and goods needed to run the U.S. economy and build weapon systems. They could also hold at risk U.S. space assets, which underpin much of our daily lives and are essential for military capabilities. Even short of an all-out war, the global economic damage from a Chinese blockade of Taiwan has been estimated to cost $5 trillion, or 5% of global gross domestic product. War with a major power would affect the life of every American in ways we can only begin to imagine. And really what this document is trying to convince us of is that we need to spend a lot more resources on defense. Of course, we don't have any money to spend on defense. It's all going to be borrowed. So if we do prepare as this commission recommends, it's going to be massive debts and deficits, which, are already locked in basically, but they could get a lot bigger if we follow the admonitions of this document. But then this paragraph I thought was really insightful, and this is the thing that we really need to pay attention to. The U.S. public are largely unaware of the dangers the United States faces or the costs, financial and otherwise, required to adequately prepare. They do not appreciate the strength of China and its partnerships or the ramifications to daily life if a conflict were to erupt. They are not anticipating disruptions to their power, water, or access to all the goods on which they rely. They have not internalized the costs of the United States losing its position as a world superpower. Now, what would the costs of the United States losing its position as a world superpower be? Well, multiple, I'm sure, but one big change would be the loss of the dollar status as the world reserve currency and likely massive dollar debasement. Even if there was, let's say, a global conflict and somehow the US came out on top, it would almost certainly mean massive economic damage. You look at Great Britain, for example. They were victorious in both the First and Second World War, but that didn't stop the British pound from losing its status as the primary world reserve currency as a result of the massive debts and deficits that were incurred in winning those conflicts. So this is something that we need to pay attention to. But let's say that things don't break out into World War III anytime soon. Hopefully they don't. Still, tensions are on the rise and economic warfare will continue in the form of sanctions from the US, but Russia and China likely have some tricks up their sleeve as well, one of which we may witness next month at the BRICS meeting in Russia at the end of October. This report from the Russian TASS news agency reveals that new aspects of a BRICS payment system and potentially currency will be revealed at that meeting, which could potentially involve the announcement of this BRICS currency unit, which will be pegged 40% to gold. Now, what kind of an impact do you think that would have on the gold price? Leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think. And the BRICS organization continues to expand. The most recent announcement is that Pakistan has bid to join BRICS, Moscow claiming they will support that. That's the Russian deputy prime minister making that statement. And so this is just another country that will be on team de-dollarization. But the point is that as tensions continue to rise around the world, there is going to be more and more of a bid for safe haven assets like gold, like silver, and that trend is not likely going to stop anytime soon. We've been watching this play out for the last 2 years, and now it appears to be accelerating. So leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think about all the topics we covered in today's video. Do you think that gold and silver are going to continue to break out on these geopolitical escalations? What do you think the outcome will be? Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.